Close your eyes and imagine drifting back, not just a few years, not just a few generations, but across the vast stretch of human history. From the glow of firelight in ancient caves to the quiet rustle of silk in royal chambers, every culture, every empire, every family has shared in the same nightly ritual: sleep. It is the one act that unites kings and peasants, warriors and farmers, scholars and wanderers. No matter how different the languages spoken, the gods worshipped, or the houses built, night always arrived, and with it, the gentle pull of rest. In this journey, we will travel through time, moving slowly from ancient worlds to empires and kingdoms, from the tents of nomads to the palaces of rulers. We will see how people prepared for sleep, what they dreamed of, what they feared in the dark, and how night shaped their lives. This is not a story of battles or conquests. It is not about power or glory. It is about the quiet hours when the world lay still and humanity surrendered to silence. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and allow the story of sleep through the ages to unfold. Long before cities, long before kingdoms, before the rise of stone castles and the written word, human beings lived in a world that was overwhelmingly quiet, dark, and uncertain once the sun fell from the sky. Nighttime in prehistoric times was not just an ordinary part of life. It was an experience deeply tied to survival, to fear, and to the slow rhythm of existence. To understand how people once slept, we have to imagine a time when there was no electricity, no glowing firelight beyond what could be managed by hand, no strong walls to keep danger away. Sleep in prehistoric times was not about comfort or leisure. It was about enduring the darkness of the world with as much safety as possible. In the earliest days, when humans were still hunters and gatherers, shelter itself was temporary. People often rested in caves, beneath trees, or in simple huts woven from branches and leaves. When darkness fell, the environment became a different place altogether. Animals emerged under the cover of night, and the sounds of insects, the rustle of predators moving in the brush, and the distant calls of unseen creatures created a constant reminder that the night belonged to others as much as to humans. In that setting, closing one's eyes and surrendering to sleep was an act of trust, and sometimes of danger. The human body, however, demanded rest. Day after day of gathering berries, hunting small game, chipping stones into tools, and walking long distances required energy, and that energy had to be restored somehow. Prehistoric people did not think about sleep as we do today. It was not a matter of science or health, but simply of necessity. When the body grew tired and the fire burned low, people would lie down on whatever surface they had, grass, leaves, or animal skins, and drift slowly into unconsciousness. Aware that the night would be long and that waking again in the morning was never guaranteed. Caves offered one of the earliest forms of reliable shelter, and inside them, the first humans arranged their sleeping areas with as much care as they could manage. A cave provided stone walls to block the wind, shadows to hide from predators, and the ability to light small fires at the entrance to keep dangerous animals away. Imagine such a place, the air cool and damp, the smell of smoke clinging to the walls, the flickering of flames casting shapes across rough rock. Families or groups huddled together, not out of affection alone, but out of the need for warmth and protection. Sleep came in groups, with people pressed close to one another, their breathing rising and falling in an even rhythm, as the night stretched endlessly forward. The earliest beds were little more than piles of gathered material. Archaeologists have found evidence that even in ancient times, humans constructed bedding out of grasses and leaves, layering them thickly to provide a cushion from the hard ground. In some places, ash from fires was spread beneath these beds, not only to provide warmth but to discourage insects and small animals from crawling into the sleeping space. Over time, the habit of creating slightly raised, padded areas became a small but vital comfort, proof that even in the harshest times, humans sought out softness where they could find it. But prehistoric sleep was rarely continuous. People lived with constant awareness that the night was a time of danger. Instead of sleeping deeply for long stretches, they often slept in short bursts, waking frequently to check the fire, to listen for noises outside the cave, or to shift their position. In groups, this may have meant that some remained half awake while others rested, taking turns in a silent, unspoken system of watchfulness. The night, then, was not a time to disappear completely into dreams, but a balance between rest and vigilance. Dreams themselves, in this world, were powerful mysteries. With no written language, no formal religion as we would recognize it, the strange visions seen during sleep must have felt like glimpses into another reality. To close one's eyes and see animals, faces, and landscapes that were not present in waking life could easily have been interpreted as messages, warnings, or fragments of the spirit world. While we cannot know exactly how prehistoric people thought about their dreams, it is safe to imagine that they carried meaning, shaping the way people understood life, death, and the unseen. The rhythm of sleep followed the rhythm of nature. Without artificial light, the setting sun marked the beginning of rest. People gathered together as the sky darkened, drawing close to one another, their day's work finished. The only light came from small fires, glowing faintly and sending sparks into the night air. When the flames dimmed, shadows swallowed the cave or hut, and humans, like most creatures, gave in to the heaviness of fatigue. Morning light, soft and gradual, was the only alarm, pulling people back into movement when it crept across the earth. In this way, prehistoric sleep was not separate from survival, it was survival. It was the pause between days of hunting, gathering, building, and wandering. It was the fragile moment when the body surrendered, yet the mind remained alert, listening for danger. It was a time when comfort was measured not in softness or warmth, but in safety, in the closeness of others, and in the presence of fire. As we drift slowly through the image of those first nights, we begin to see how sleep, something we take for granted, was once one of the most uncertain and precious parts of life. And as the world moved forward, as humans built societies and cultures, the way they slept changed with them, leaving behind caves and fires for reed mats, wooden houses, and eventually, beds fit for kings. But in the beginning, when the world was raw and untamed, sleep was a fragile thread, binding humans to the cycle of night and day, rest and survival. Chapter 2: Sleep in Ancient Egypt. When the world moved from caves and wandering tribes into the first great civilizations, sleep began to take on new forms, new meanings, and new rituals. Among the earliest and most fascinating of these civilizations was ancient Egypt, a land shaped by the Nile, by sun and sand, and by the constant rhythm of life and death. To understand how Egyptians slept is to look not only at the physical arrangements of their nightly rest, but also at the deep beliefs that wrapped sleep in mystery and sacredness. For in Egypt, sleep was never only about closing the eyes. It was about opening them to another realm. The geography of Egypt itself shaped the patterns of sleep. Life was clustered along the Nile, the river that cut like a ribbon through an otherwise endless desert. Days were hot, the sun bearing down with unrelenting weight, and nights cooled sharply once darkness fell. In mud brick houses built close together, families arranged their spaces according to both need and comfort. Poorer families lived in small, one-room homes, their beds little more than woven mats placed on the floor, sometimes raised slightly on wooden frames. Wealthier Egyptians, meanwhile, slept on elevated platforms, beds made of wood stretched with cord or leather, covered with linen sheets. But no matter the status, one detail marked Egyptian sleep distinctly: the use of headrests. Egyptian headrests were not the soft pillows we imagine today. Instead, they were carved supports, usually made of wood, stone, or ivory, curved to fit beneath the head. The design lifted the skull slightly from the sleeping surface, keeping the neck elevated and cool in the hot climate. At first glance, such a device might appear uncomfortable to us, but to Egyptians it was both practical and symbolic. It allowed air to circulate around the head in the sweltering nights, and it was also tied to spiritual beliefs. The head was considered sacred, the seat of life and spirit, and the headrest was thought to protect it, both in the vulnerable state of sleep and in the eternal rest of death. Indeed, headrests were so important that they were placed in tombs alongside the deceased, ensuring comfort in the afterlife. Night in Egypt carried with it a silence unlike that of the forest or cave. The desert muffled sound, leaving only the whisper of the wind against the sand, the occasional bark of a dog, or the gentle flow of the Nile. Families gathered indoors, extinguishing lamps slowly as they settled to rest. Oil lamps or small fires provided light until the time came to lie down. In the poorest homes, the floor was cleared and mats spread out. In wealthier homes, servants might prepare beds with care, shaking out linens, arranging headrests, and ensuring that mosquitoes or insects were driven away with herbs and smoke. Dreams held a special place in Egyptian thought. To sleep was to step into another world, and dreams were often interpreted as messages from the gods. Entire texts, known as dream books, were created to record and explain the meaning of visions seen at night. A dream of water might mean prosperity. A dream of conflict might serve as a warning. Temples dedicated to certain gods offered rituals of dream incubation, where worshippers would sleep in sacred spaces in the hope of receiving divine messages. Sleep, then, was not a passive act, but an opportunity to commune with the unseen, to seek guidance, or to confirm beliefs. The poor and the rich alike closed their eyes with the same vulnerability, but their experience of sleep differed in comfort and in ritual. A peasant along the Nile might finish a long day of labor in the fields, working under the hot sun to irrigate crops or harvest grain. His evening meal would be simple: bread, onions, beer, and his sleeping mat plain, perhaps shared with family members. The air inside his mud brick home would cool as the night deepened, and his rest would be deep but broken, interrupted by the sounds of animals outside or by the need to tend to a fire. A nobleman, by contrast, would dine on richer food, recline in a more spacious home, and rest on a bed framed with carved wood, draped with fine linens, a headrest of polished ivory beneath his skull. For both, however, sleep was the same passage into night, the same surrender to forces beyond control. In tomb paintings, Egyptians often depicted the act of sleep alongside scenes of death and rebirth. Just as the sun set each night only to rise again, so too did the sleeper die a small death each night, awakening in the morning renewed. This belief linked sleep to the eternal cycle of life, death, and afterlife. To close the eyes and sleep was to mimic the journey of the soul, a daily rehearsal for the greater passage to come. Slowly, through centuries, the traditions of Egyptian sleep became layered with meaning. The headrest became not only a tool of rest, but a sacred object. Dreams became not only personal visions, but divine communication. And the quiet nights along the Nile became more than pauses between days. They became a part of the rhythm of existence itself. Chapter 3: Sleep in Mesopotamia and Babylon. Night fell differently over Mesopotamia than it did anywhere else in the world. Between the Tigris and the Euphrates, where some of the first great cities rose, darkness came not only to open fields and desert plains, but to crowded alleys, to mud brick houses pressed close together, and to streets that echoed with the sound of animals, of guards on patrol, and of neighbors whispering in the dusk. Sleep in Mesopotamia was never just the silent retreat of a family to its corner of the world. It was part of the rhythm of city life, part of a civilization learning, for the first time, how to sleep inside the walls of human-made order rather than in caves or open camps. The people of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria inherited the vast and unpredictable landscape of the Fertile Crescent. By day, the sun blazed hot, pressing against the mud brick walls until they warmed like clay ovens. By night, the temperature dropped sharply, and shadows pooled along the canals and irrigation ditches that kept the fields alive. Families returned to their homes at sundown, and in the faint light of oil lamps, they prepared their spaces for rest. Houses were often built with thick mud brick walls, flat roofs, and small courtyards. For the poorest, a single room might serve as kitchen, workroom, and bedroom all at once. Mats woven from reeds, plentiful along the banks of the rivers, were laid directly on the floor. A family might spread several mats close together, so that parents, children, and sometimes even visiting relatives could lie side by side. Wealthier households, however, introduced a measure of separation. They had raised sleeping platforms, sometimes built of wood, with woolen blankets or animal skins for added warmth. Servants might sleep on mats nearby, ready to wake if called. As in earlier times, fire remained central to the act of sleep. Yet in cities like Ur or Babylon, where wood was scarce, oil lamps became the more common source of light. The flame burned slowly, fueled by sesame oil, casting a dim glow over the plastered walls. Before lying down, a family might check that the door was barred, that the lamp had enough oil to last until dawn, and that food and water were tucked safely away from pests. The simple acts of shutting the house against the night carried deep meaning. They were the boundary between the world outside, full of noise, danger, and uncertainty, and the fragile peace within. Dreams, in Mesopotamia, were not mere curiosities. They were powerful signs. Kings consulted priests and diviners to interpret the visions that came to them in the night. Ordinary people, too, believed that dreams might reveal the will of the gods. The Mesopotamians recorded dreams on clay tablets, inscribing them carefully in cuneiform, noting the images, the symbols, and the outcomes. Dream books, like those of Egypt, existed here as well, filled with interpretations. To dream of water might mean abundance. To dream of a lion might warn of danger. To dream of a feast might foretell prosperity. Sleeping, then, was not only rest but also a kind of conversation with the divine. Imagine a Babylonian king, reclining in his palace, his bed more elaborate than anything a peasant could hope for. It might be made of wood imported from distant lands, draped with woolen blankets dyed in rich colors, set in a room where servants guarded the doors. Yet even in such luxury, the king was not free from the weight of sleep. He might rise in the middle of the night, shaken by a dream, calling for his priests to record and interpret it. The palace itself, though grand, did not silence the noises of the city, the barking of dogs, the bray of donkeys, the voices of men on watch along the walls. Sleep, even for a king, was always fragile. For ordinary people, it was even more so. In the crowded quarters of Babylon, noise carried easily through thin walls. The cry of a baby, the clatter of pottery, or the lowing of cattle could rouse an entire household. People likely slept in segments, dozing for a few hours, waking to tend to lamps or to check on animals, then lying back down again. This broken rhythm of sleep matched the pattern of early societies, where long, uninterrupted slumber was rare. Instead, sleep came in waves, punctuated by wakefulness, by brief tasks, or by moments of prayer. Night across Mesopotamia carried its own unique soundscape. The rustle of reeds in the canals, the croaking of frogs, and the distant movement of water in the rivers made a constant backdrop. Over this came the human noises of the city, a late returner knocking on a door, a guard's footsteps echoing on stone, a sudden shout from someone startled awake by a dream. Sleepers, lying on their reed mats, would hear it all, their minds drifting between wakefulness and slumber, the boundary between reality and dream as thin as the linen sheets that covered them. The gods of Mesopotamia, too, shaped the way people thought about the night. Shamash, the sun god, ruled the day, but as darkness fell, it was the moon god, Sin, who presided. His light guided travelers, his cycles marked time, and his presence reminded sleepers that the heavens themselves watched over their rest. To lie down under the stars, or beneath a roof, was never to be truly alone. The sky, vast and unblinking, was always above, a reminder of forces larger than human life. In Babylon, great ziggurats rose above the city, their terraced steps reaching toward the heavens. At night, their silhouettes loomed against the starlit sky, and within their precincts, priests performed rituals that marked the passage of time. The city's people, drifting into sleep, would know that somewhere, in the sacred spaces high above, prayers and offerings were being made. This connection between ordinary rest and divine order gave sleep an almost sacred rhythm, binding human vulnerability to cosmic cycles. Travelers and soldiers, too, experienced their own kind of sleep. A caravan resting outside the city walls would build small fires, arrange mats on the ground, and keep watch in turns. Soldiers on campaign might lie beneath simple tents, their armor stacked nearby, their weapons close at hand. For them, sleep was lighter still, always shadowed by the need for vigilance. The desert nights were cold, the stars sharp and clear, and the wind carried the smell of dust and distance. To sleep in such a place was not comfort, but necessity. Through it all, one theme persisted: sleep was never entirely private. It was shared by families pressed close together on mats, by soldiers resting side by side, by kings whose dreams were recorded by scribes. Sleep was not only a physical act but a social one, shaped by the closeness of others, by the rhythm of the city, and by the ever-present gaze of the gods. And so, in Mesopotamia, the act of lying down at night carried both the weight of ordinary life and the shadow of eternity. It was the pause in the rhythm of labor, the fragile stillness in a city that never truly slept. It was a moment when human beings, whether kings in their palaces or peasants in their huts, surrendered themselves to darkness, to dreams, and to the ancient cycle of rest that bound them all together. Chapter 4: Sleep in Ancient Greece. In the world of ancient Greece, sleep was not simply a pause in daily activity. It was a subject of philosophy, a theme in myth, and an everyday reality shaped by climate, architecture, and belief. To picture how the Greeks slept is to imagine narrow streets lined with stone houses, the glow of oil lamps dimming as families settled for the night, and the steady rhythm of life measured not by clocks but by the rising and setting of the sun. Houses in Greece were often built of stone or sun-dried brick, clustered close together, their walls whitewashed to reflect the brightness of the sun. Inside, sleeping arrangements depended on wealth and station. For the poor, mats of straw or reeds spread on the floor provided the only bedding. For the wealthy, beds, known as clanai, were wooden frames laced with leather or cord, topped with cushions stuffed with wool or feathers. These beds often had legs carved in graceful shapes, sometimes ending in the feet of animals. Linen sheets covered the surface, and woolen blankets offered warmth in the cooler months. Unlike in Mesopotamia or Egypt, Greek houses often had separate rooms for different activities, and wealthier families set aside spaces for rest. Still, sleep was rarely solitary. Family members or servants might share rooms, and privacy was limited. In smaller homes, everyone might sleep in the same central space, their mats lined up side by side, their breathing blending into the chorus of the night. The Greeks thought deeply about sleep. To them, it was not merely physical rest but a mystery worthy of explanation. Philosophers like Aristotle and Plato pondered what happened to the soul during slumber. They observed that the body senses seemed dulled, yet the mind created images and experiences as vivid as waking life. They asked, was sleep a kind of temporary death, or was it a state in which the soul traveled elsewhere? To explore these questions was to touch on the nature of life itself. In mythology, sleep was personified as Hypnos, a gentle god who carried mortals into rest. His twin brother was Thanatos, the god of death, reminding all that sleep and death were closely linked. Dreams, meanwhile, were overseen by the Oneirur, spirits who brought visions to sleepers. Among them was Morpheus, who shaped dreams into human forms. To the Greeks, closing one's eyes each night was not only an act of recovery, but an encounter with divine forces that moved invisibly through the darkness. The nightly rhythm of Greek life was simple but enduring. The day began with sunrise, for artificial light was scarce. Oil lamps and torches could provide illumination, but they were expensive and smoky. Thus, when the sun set, activity slowed, and families gathered for evening meals. Afterward, conversation lingered in the fading light, and then sleep followed naturally. In the countryside, nights were quiet except for the sounds of insects, the call of owls, or the movement of livestock. In the city, the narrow streets echoed with the footsteps of those still awake, the barking of dogs, or the voices of late drinkers returning home. Dreams carried deep meaning for the Greeks. They believed that some dreams came from the gods, offering guidance, warnings, or prophecies. Others were thought to arise from the body, reflections of health or illness. Temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, offered rituals of dream incubation. Worshippers would sleep within the temple, hoping to receive dreams that revealed cures or divine advice. Such practices show how closely the Greeks linked sleep to the broader patterns of religion and healing. Sleep was not always restful, however. Farmers and laborious, after long days in the fields, collapsed onto their mats exhausted, their rest broken by the demands of animals or the changes in weather. Soldiers slept in barracks or on campaign, lying close together, their spears and shields within reach. Sailors on triremes dozed in shifts, resting where they could on hard wooden benches, the sound of the sea a constant backdrop. Sleep, in all these cases, was shaped by necessity as much as by comfort. In literature, Greek writers often described sleep in poetic terms. Homer, in the Iliad and Odyssey, spoke of it as a powerful force that could sweep over heroes and mortals alike. To be seized by sleep was to fall under a spell, to surrender to something greater than human will. This imagery captured the ambivalence of sleep. It was both gentle and overwhelming, both restorative and dangerous in its resemblance to death. As the night passed, families stirred occasionally, checking lamps or stoking small fires. Some may have experienced segmented sleep, waking in the middle of the night for a brief period before returning to rest. Others slept through until dawn, their bodies aligned with the cycles of natural light. The morning sun, bright and insistent, served as the only alarm, pulling people back into the rhythm of the day. Thus, in ancient Greece, sleep was not only a necessity but a subject woven into philosophy, religion, and art. It was shaped by the physical spaces of houses, by the practicalities of bedding, and by the deep beliefs about gods and dreams. To close one's eyes was to enter a realm overseen by Hypnos and his kin, a realm where the soul wandered and the gods whispered. It was a nightly reminder of life's fragility, of the closeness of death, and of the mysterious power that lay hidden in something as ordinary and as profound as sleep. Chapter 5. Sleep in Ancient Rome. To step into ancient Rome at night is to enter a world both familiar and strange. The Romans, masters of architecture, engineering, and order, lived lives that were structured by lore, custom, and ritual. Yet when it came to sleep, their habits were shaped by the same forces that shaped the rest of the ancient world: light, space, belief, and necessity. Roman houses ranged from cramped insulae, apartment buildings stacked with the poor, to sprawling domus, villas filled with wealth and luxury. For those in the insulae, sleep was often rough. Families squeezed into single rooms, their mats of straw or wool laid out on the floor. The walls were thin, and the sounds of neighbours, carts rolling through narrow streets, and distant taverns kept nights restless. Fires were a constant danger, and the air was thick with the smoke of oil lamps. Sleep in the insulae was light, easily broken, and shared by necessity. The wealthy experienced something different. Their villas contained dedicated cubicular or bedchambers. These rooms were small and intimate, often placed away from the noise of courtyards and atriums. Beds were raised wooden frames, elaborately carved, topped with mattresses stuffed with wool, feathers, or straw, depending on wealth. Linen sheets and wool blankets provided warmth, and pillows stuffed with feathers supported the head. Wealthy Romans might even own several beds, moving between them according to season or occasion. Yet even for the elite, sleep was not private in the modern sense. Servants might rest nearby, ready to assist if called. Lamps flickered in niches, casting shadows on painted walls. The Romans loved decoration, and even bedchambers might be adorned with frescoes or mosaics, images of gods, landscapes, or mythological scenes that looked down upon sleepers. To lie in bed was to lie under the gaze of art, to rest within a space shaped by culture as much as by comfort. The Romans thought deeply about sleep. Writers like Seneca, Cicero, and Pliny the Elder commented on its nature. Physicians debated its role in health, observing that rest was necessary for balance in the humors. Dreams were considered meaningful, sometimes dismissed as illusions but often treated as omens. The practice of dream interpretation, inherited from Greece and the East, found its way into Roman religion. Priests and augurs might look to dreams for guidance, believing that the gods spoke in visions granted during the night. The god of sleep, Somnus, held a place in Roman belief, alongside his Greek counterpart Hypnos. His dwelling was imagined as a cave where no sound or light intruded, where poppies and herbs of forgetfulness grew. To the Roman mind, sleep was both gentle and absolute, a power that touched everyone from emperor to slave. In poetry, sleep was praised as a release from toil, a balm for sorrow, and a reminder of mortality. Roman nights followed the rhythm of watch and vigil. The city never fully slept. The streets echoed with footsteps of watchmen, with the clatter of carts bringing goods, with the murmur of late gatherings. Taverns stayed open deep into the night, their noise drifting into nearby homes. Dogs barked, fountains splashed, and the voices of Rome carried far in the stillness. For many, sleep came in segments. They might rest for several hours, wake in the middle of the night to pray, reflect, or converse, then return to slumber before dawn. Soldiers on campaign experienced yet another form of sleep. In camps set up with Roman precision, tents were arranged in perfect order, each man knowing his place. Guards kept watch while others slept, their armor and weapons near at hand. Sleep for soldiers was brief, broken by duty, and taken on hard ground with only cloaks for covering. Yet discipline ensured that rest was shared fairly, each man receiving his turn. In these moments, the vulnerability of sleep was balanced by the strength of order. For slaves, sleep was dictated by masters. Some rested on simple pallets in corners of the household, others directly on the floor. Their rest was short, interrupted by the demands of work, and their nights were often restless. Yet even in these harsh conditions, sleep came as the one space of relief from endless labor. Roman literature often portrayed sleep as both a necessity and a luxury. Poets described lovers resting together, the peace of midday naps, or the sorrow of sleepless nights haunted by worry. The midday rest, or meridiatio, was a cherished custom, particularly in hot climates. After the day's work, Romans often reclined and dozed, breaking the day into waking and sleeping segments. In villas outside the city, nights were quieter. Farmers and landowners rose with the sun and retired soon after dark. The sounds of nature replaced the noise of the city: crickets, the rustle of leaves, the call of birds. Sleep here was deeper, less troubled, aligned closely with the rhythms of the earth. The cycle of night and day structured all of Roman life. Without electric light, time belonged to the sun and moon. The stars wheeled overhead, and torches and lamps only softened the darkness. Sleep, in this context, was both a necessity and a surrender. It reminded Romans of their humanity, of their limits, and of their connection to forces beyond their control. To sleep in ancient Rome was to participate in a universal act, but one shaped by class, by space, and by belief. The poor lay in crowded rooms, their rest shallow and uncertain. The rich reclined on carved beds, their sleep observed by art and attended by servants. Soldiers dozed in camps, slaves collapsed where they could, and the city itself hummed around them. Through it all, the gods watched, and the poets wrote, and the night passed into dawn. Thus, in the empire that spanned the known world, sleep remained as essential and as mysterious as ever. It was the common ground between emperor and beggar, a nightly descent into silence and dreams, a pause in the march of Roman order. In its simplicity and its depth, it revealed the humanity that lay beneath the grandeur of marble, lore, and conquest. Chapter 6. Sleep in Ancient China. To imagine sleep in ancient China is to enter a civilization that prized harmony, balance, and order, where even the simplest act of rest was shaped by philosophy, tradition, and social rank. For thousands of years, Chinese life was guided by the rhythms of agriculture, the turning of seasons, and the teachings of Confucianism and Taoism. In this context, sleep was not merely a pause but a vital part of life's cycle, a daily return to balance in body and spirit. Chinese homes varied greatly between peasants and nobility. In rural villages, houses were simple, often built from wood, clay, or packed earth. Families slept on raised platforms or kangs, brick or clay beds built into the wall, heated from beneath by small stoves or flues connected to kitchen fires. These kangs provided warmth during cold winters and doubled as spaces for sitting or working during the day. Straw mats or thin quilts softened the surface, and family members often shared the same platform, huddled together against the night's chill. In wealthier households, especially among scholars and officials, sleep was more refined. Wooden bedsteads, sometimes lacquered and carved, stood as symbols of status. These beds might be enclosed with curtains or canopies, shielding sleepers from drafts and creating a private world within the room. Silk quilts, embroidered with patterns of clouds, flowers, or auspicious animals, covered the sleepers, while pillows stuffed with buckwheat, reeds, or even porcelain offered support. The choice of pillow was not just about comfort, but about health. Hard pillows, though strange to modern eyes, were believed to align the body and promote proper breathing. Philosophy deeply influenced how the Chinese viewed sleep. Daoist thought saw rest as a return to harmony with the Tao, the natural order of the universe. To sleep well was to allow the body's qi, or life energy, to flow freely, restoring balance between yin and yang. Confucian teachings emphasized discipline and routine. One should rise early, with the sun, and not linger idly in bed. Sleep, then, was both practical and moral, a matter of health and virtue alike. Dreams held a special place in Chinese thought. They were seen as pathways to other realms, journeys of the spirit beyond the confines of the body. Some dreams were omens, revealing the will of heaven or the movements of ancestors. Others were understood as reflections of the sleeper's inner state, disturbances in qi that showed imbalance in body or mind. Dream interpretation became a practiced art, recorded in manuals that offered guidance on how to read symbols and images. A dream of water might signal fortune, while one of fire might warn of conflict. Nighttime in China was marked by sounds that shifted with the setting. In rural areas, crickets and frogs filled the air, their rhythms blending with the rustling of bamboo or the creak of wooden doors. In cities, the night watch kept time, striking gongs or wooden clappers at intervals to mark the changing hours. Lanterns flickered in streets, their red glow casting shifting patterns on walls and pavements. Families, once gathered for evening meals, retreated to their beds as silence deepened, broken only by whispers or the cry of an infant. The emperor himself, though surrounded by luxury, was bound by the rituals of sleep. In the forbidden city of later centuries, the imperial bedchamber was a place of both intimacy and ceremony. The emperor's rest was attended by eunuchs and concubines, governed by strict rules. His dreams were considered matters of state, interpreted by officials who sought omens for the empire's fate. Sleep, for the ruler of China, was never fully his own. It was part of the great machinery of governance and belief. Soldiers on campaign slept in tents or beneath the open sky, their armor stacked knee-high, their horses tethered close. Sleep in such settings was light, often broken by the calls of sentries or the movements of comrades. Farmers, by contrast, collapsed into exhausted rest after long days of labor, their sleep deep but easily disturbed by the needs of livestock or the cry of roosters before dawn. Medical texts, such as those in the tradition of Chinese medicine, emphasized the importance of proper sleep. Insomnia or troubled dreams were seen as signs of imbalance, to be treated with herbs, acupuncture, or changes in diet. Even the position of sleep mattered. Lying on the right side was said to preserve health, while lying on the stomach was discouraged. These teachings reveal how deeply the Chinese tied rest to the wider order of body and cosmos. Literature and poetry often celebrated the quiet of night. Poets wrote of moonlight falling across courtyards, of lying awake listening to the wind in the pines, of dreams that carried them to distant mountains or to reunions with loved ones. Sleep, in these verses, was both gentle and mysterious, a theme that revealed the sensitivity of Chinese culture to the interplay between nature and human life. In the rhythm of daily existence, night brought both rest and reflection. The scholar rose early to study by lamplight before dawn. The farmer rose with the sun to tend fields. The artisan, weary from labor, sought solace on his kang. And through all, sleep renewed the strength to continue, linking each day to the next. Thus, in ancient China, sleep was more than rest. It was philosophy made flesh, a practice shaped by belief, by environment, and by social order. It revealed the balance between comfort and necessity, between luxury and simplicity, between body and spirit. To lie down at night was to join a cycle as old as the earth, a rhythm that bound each person to family, to nature, and to the heavens above. Chapter 7. Sleep in Ancient India. In ancient India, sleep was more than a bodily necessity. It was a subject woven into philosophy, religion, and daily rhythm. The people of the subcontinent, living in a land of varied climates and landscapes, saw rest not only as recovery but as a state of connection with deeper truths of existence. To understand their sleep is to glimpse the harmony they sought between body, spirit, and cosmos. In villages, where most of the population lived, sleep was simple. Houses were built of mud, wood, or stone, often with thatched roofs. Inside, families slept on the floor or on woven charpers, wooden frames laced with ropes or cords. The charpai, both sturdy and breathable, suited the heat of the Indian plains. During hot seasons, people sometimes carried their charpers outdoors, sleeping beneath the open sky, cooled by breezes and accompanied by the chorus of insects and night birds. Quilts, cotton sheets, or woolen blankets were added according to season, and pillows were often small or absent altogether. In wealthier households, sleep was more elaborate. Nobles, merchants, and kings lay upon beds decorated with carvings, covered in textiles of cotton or silk. The use of cotton was especially notable in India, for it was among the first regions to cultivate and weave it. Beds were adorned with colorful fabrics, embroidered with patterns, and scented with oils or incense. Curtains or canopies sometimes enclosed the sleeper, shielding them from insects and creating a sense of seclusion. Servants attended to lamps and fires, ensuring comfort through the night. Philosophy gave profound meaning to sleep. The Upanishads, ancient texts of spiritual teaching, described sleep as one of the states of the soul. Waking, dreaming, and deep sleep were considered distinct modes of being, each revealing something of the self. Deep, dreamless sleep was viewed as a return to Brahman, the ultimate reality, a temporary dissolution of the individual into the universal. To close one's eyes at night, then, was not simply to rest but to touch, however briefly, the essence of existence. Dreams, too, were treated with seriousness. They were messages of the subconscious, reflections of karma, or visions granted by deities. Interpreters of dreams offered guidance, reading symbols and images for their hidden meaning. A dream of water might signify abundance, while one of fire might warn of conflict. For kings and rulers, dreams could influence decisions of state, for they were thought to reveal the will of the gods or the direction of destiny. Religion shaped sleep in countless ways. Devout Hindus recited prayers before lying down, calling upon protection from spirits or ill fortune. The positioning of the bed was influenced by belief. It was considered auspicious to rest with one's head pointing east or south, and inauspicious to face north. To sleep aligned with cosmic directions was to live in harmony with universal order. In Buddhist practice, monks followed strict routines of rest, often sleeping lightly, seated or lying on simple mats, their hours governed by discipline and meditation. Sleep, for them, was not indulgence but necessity, kept in balance with wakeful mindfulness. The night in India was alive with sound and sensation. In villages, crickets and frogs sang through the darkness, while dogs barked or cattle shifted in their enclosures. In cities, the air was thick with the scent of spices, smoke, and humanity. Lanterns glowed faintly in courtyards, and watchmen patrolled streets, calling out to mark the hours. The moonlight illuminated temples, rivers, and forests alike, casting its silvery glow upon sleepers beneath open skies. Kings and queens slept surrounded by luxury, yet even their rest carried ritual weight. Palaces contained chambers adorned with carvings, frescoes, and lamps of bronze or clay. The ruler's bed was not only a place of rest but a throne of night, a space from which dreams might carry divine messages. Concubines, attendants, and guards stood near, ensuring safety and attending to any need. Sleep for royalty was both intimate and public, a reflection of status as much as a personal act. Travelers, merchants, and pilgrims slept in ways shaped by their journeys. Along roads, rest houses, or dharamshalas offered shelter, where mats or charpairs was spread for guests. Pilgrims to sacred sites often slept in temples or beneath the stars, their dreams mingling with prayers and chants. The great rivers, the Ganges, the Yamuna, herd countless sleepers along their banks, their nights marked by the flowing of water and the murmurs of devotion. Medical traditions in India also emphasized the role of sleep. Ayurveda, the ancient system of health, taught that proper rest was essential for balance among the dosas, the bodily humors of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Too little sleep caused imbalance, while too much was harmful. The timing of sleep mattered as well. One should rest early in the night and rise before sunrise, aligning the body with the natural cycles of light and darkness. Remedies for poor sleep included herbs, oils, and meditation, reflecting the close connection between health and spirituality. Literature and poetry gave voice to the intimacy of night. Sanskrit poets wrote of lovers meeting in secret, of solitary figures lying awake in longing, of the peace that settled over forests and palaces alike. The moon was a frequent companion in verse, symbolizing love, time, and the gentle passage of night. Sleep, in these works, was not only described but celebrated, a reminder of the universality of human experience. Thus, in ancient India, sleep was shaped by climate, by faith, by philosophy, and by daily life. It was practiced on charpairs under open skies, in palaces rich with silk and incense, in monasteries where discipline ruled, and in humble huts of packed earth. It was guided by the teachings of the Upanishads, by the wisdom of Ayurveda, and by the rhythms of nature itself. To rest in this world was to align body and spirit with the cosmos, to step briefly away from toil and desire, and to touch the deep stillness that lay beneath all things. Sleep, in its simplicity and its depth, carried both comfort and mystery, binding the people of India to one another and to the vast order of existence that stretched beyond the stars. Chapter 8. Sleep in the Islamic Golden Age. The Islamic Golden Age, stretching from the 8th to the 13th centuries, was a period of immense learning, culture, and refinement. From Baghdad to Cordoba, Damascus to Cairo, scholars studied the heavens, poets wrote of love and longing, and architects built mosques and palaces that still inspire awe. In this world, sleep held its own significance, shaped by science, religion, and the rhythms of daily life. Houses varied widely depending on wealth and region. In bustling cities like Baghdad, homes of common families were built from brick or stone, their courtyards shaded by trees or awnings. At night, families often slept together in central rooms or on rooftops during warm seasons, lying beneath the stars on mats or simple bedding. Privacy was limited, and the cool night air offered relief from the heat of day. Wealthier families enjoyed greater comfort. Their homes contained separate rooms for rest, with beds raised above the floor, padded with cushions, quilts, and silks. Curtains enclosed these beds, offering seclusion, while lamps burned gently in niches. Fragrant oils and incense perfumed the chambers, and fountains in courtyards provided the soothing sound of flowing water. The wealthy might even move between rooms according to season, retreating to shaded, airy spaces in summer and warmer chambers in winter. Religion shaped nightly routines profoundly. Islam encouraged prayer before sleep, with supplications asking for protection through the night and safe return to wakefulness. It was taught that sleep was a kind of death, and waking a form of resurrection, reminding believers of life's fragility and God's mercy. Certain positions were recommended. Lying on the right side, facing the Qibla, was considered proper, echoing the Prophet's practice. To sleep in this way was to align the body with faith, turning rest into devotion. Dreams carried great importance in this world. The Quran itself described dreams as signs and messages, and traditions of the Prophet affirmed their significance. Some dreams were seen as glad tidings from God, others as whispers from the self, and still others as deceptions from darker forces. Scholars such as Ibn Sirin compiled detailed manuals of dream interpretation, guiding readers in the meanings of symbols. A vision of light might signify divine favor. A dream of water might speak of knowledge or purity. For rulers and commoners alike, dreams were taken seriously, shaping decisions and inspiring reflection. The scientific spirit of the age also touched sleep. Physicians like Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, Avicenna, studied its nature, linking it to bodily health. In Avicenna's canon of medicine, sleep was described as essential for balancing the humors, allowing the body to repair itself and the mind to recover. He offered advice on proper timing, recommending early sleep and early rising, in harmony with natural cycles. Insomnia was treated with herbs, diets, and sometimes music, an art believed to soothe the heart and mind. Nightlife in Islamic cities was alive with light and sound. Markets often stayed open after sunset, illuminated by lamps. The calls of vendors, the recitations of poets, and the laughter of gatherings filled the air. But as hours deepened, quiet returned. Watchmen patrolled the streets, calling the hours with chants. In mosques, some remained awake in prayer, their voices echoing softly under domes. For most, however, the city darkened, and sleep spread across rooftops and courtyards like a shared blanket. In palaces, rulers lay in chambers rich with textiles and artistry. Carved wooden ceilings, jeweled lamps, and fine carpets surrounded them. Yet even here, sleep was touched by duty. Guards kept watch nearby, concubines or attendants rested at hand, and the ruler's dreams might be reported to scholars or imams, seeking divine insight into affairs of state. For caliphs and sultans, the night was never entirely private, even when wrapped in silence. Travelers and merchants found their rest in caravanserais, inns built along trade routes. Here, mats and bedding were laid in shared rooms or under open courtyards, with animals tethered nearby. The sounds of snoring men, restless camels, and the creak of wooden wheels filled the night. Pilgrims traveling to Mecca slept in tents or under the stars, their rest accompanied by prayer and the murmur of devotion. For them, sleep was not merely a pause but part of a sacred journey. Poetry of the era reflected the intimacy of night. Poets wrote of sleeplessness in love, of dreams that reunited them with absent beloveds, of the calm of moonlit courtyards. The imagery of stars, nightingales, and jasmine-filled verses, weaving sleep into the fabric of longing and beauty. To rest beneath the heavens was to lie within a poem itself, surrounded by the music of creation. For ordinary people, sleep was simple and essential. A farmer returned from fields, washing before prayer, then lay with family on mats of wool or cotton. The craftsman, weary from labor, stretched out beneath a rooftop breeze. Children fell asleep to stories, their eyes closing as oil lamps burned low. The cycle repeated endlessly, a rhythm that bound all, from caliph to peasant, from scholar to soldier, into the same nightly descent into silence. Thus, in the Islamic Golden Age, sleep was more than a biological need. It was shaped by faith, refined by science, enriched by art, and bound to the daily life of a vast and varied world. To close one's eyes at night was to enter a state watched over by God, studied by physicians, and celebrated by poets. It was a reminder that even in an age of learning and empire, the most universal act remained simple: to lie down, to rest, and to dream. Chapter 9. Sleep in the Aztec Empire. Far across the oceans, in the Valley of Mexico, the Aztec Empire flourished during the 14th to early 16th centuries. Their world was one of vibrant ritual, powerful rulers, bustling markets, and deep devotion to gods who governed every part of existence. In such a culture, sleep was not merely a natural act but a sacred rhythm tied to cycles of sun, moon, and the unseen forces that shaped human life. Aztec homes were often built of adobe or stone, with thatched or flat roofs. Inside, the sleeping space was simple yet functional. Families commonly rested on reed mats, called patates, spread across the floor. These mats were woven tightly and provided firm support. Blankets made from cotton or woven agave fibers covered sleepers, offering warmth against the cool night air of the highlands. In wealthier households, the mats might be layered with soft animal skins or adorned with dyed textiles, showing status even in slumber. Night in Tenochtitlan, the great capital, carried its own rhythm. As the sun set, torches flickered along canals and courtyards. The chatter of markets faded, replaced by the sounds of water gently lapping against chinampers, the floating gardens that fed the city. Families gathered for evening meals, often maize tortillas, beans, and chili stews, before retiring. Children listened to elders tell tales of gods and heroes, their eyes heavy as smoke from hearts curled upward. Soon, the household fell into sleep, woven together by kinship and ritual. Religion permeated every part of life, including rest. The Aztecs believed the soul could travel during dreams, venturing into realms beyond the body. Dreams were seen as messages from gods, omens of future events, or warnings of danger. Priests often interpreted dreams, guiding rulers and warriors through their meanings. A dream of fire might signal conflict, while water might symbolize fertility. Some believed that during sleep, the soul could even be snatched away by hostile spirits, leaving the body vulnerable. Thus, rituals of protection, such as offerings or charms, were sometimes performed before bed. The Aztecs tied sleep to cosmic balance. The rising and setting of the sun were seen as the struggles of the sun god Huitzilopochtli, who fought nightly against darkness. To sleep was to join in this cycle, resting as the universe itself turned. Waking in the morning symbolized victory, the return of light and life. In this way, rest was not an escape from duty but a reflection of the eternal battle between night and day, life and death. Among the noble and ruling classes, sleep carried both comfort and weight. Emperors rested in chambers adorned with fine mats and embroidered cotton blankets, attended by servants and guarded by warriors. Yet even their dreams were matters of state, believed to reveal divine will. An emperor's restless night might spark rituals or sacrifices, seeking to restore cosmic order. For rulers, the private act of sleep was never truly free. It was bound to the fate of their people. Warriors, central to Aztec society, experienced sleep differently. Before battle, they might fast and pray, seeking visions through dreams. It was believed that gods could grant strength or guidance while they slept. After campaigns, weary soldiers rested in barracks or upon the earth itself, their mats laid near their weapons. Their sleep was often brief, interrupted by duties, ceremonies, or alarms. Yet even in exhaustion, dreams were prized as signs of bravery, fear, or divine favor. The common people, who farmed, built, and traded, followed the natural cycle of day and night. Farmers rose before dawn to tend chenampers, returning home as darkness fell. Their evenings were simple, meals with family, storytelling, and rest upon mats. Unlike the nobles, their dreams were rarely interpreted by priests, yet they too respected them. A troubling dream might lead to small household rituals, offerings of maize or incense to calm unseen forces. Aztec healers, known as Tisitl, paid attention to sleep as a marker of health. A restless sleeper might be thought to suffer from imbalance of body or spirit. Herbs such as passionflower or valerian-like plants were given to calm the mind. Special baths or steam rituals could prepare the body for deeper rest. In this, sleep was part of a larger web of medicine that connected the physical, spiritual, and cosmic. Night in the Aztec world was alive with sound. Dogs barked in courtyards, priests chanted in temples, and distant drums carried across water. Yet silence also spread across neighborhoods, broken only by the rustle of mats or the sigh of wind. Families huddled together, warmth and kinship their shared blanket. The stars above shone with particular power, for the heavens were mapped with gods and myths, each constellation holding meaning. To sleep beneath them was to lie inside the great story of the universe itself. When dawn returned, so too did the duties of life. The city awoke with the cries of market vendors, the clatter of tools, the shouts of boatmen along canals. For the Aztecs, waking was not merely the start of another day, it was proof that the sun had once again triumphed, that life continued. Sleep had done its part in maintaining balance, allowing both body and cosmos to renew. In the Aztec Empire, then, sleep was not passive. It was a journey of the soul, a reflection of divine cycles, and a shared human act that bound emperor and peasant, warrior and child, into the rhythm of night and day. Rest was woven into faith, family, and the cosmos itself. To close one's eyes in Tenochtitlan was to step into mystery, to dream within the embrace of gods, and to awaken once more into a world both fragile and eternal. Chapter 10. Sleep in Early Modern Europe. The early modern period, spanning the 16th to 18th centuries, marked a world in transition. Kingdoms rose and fell, empires stretched across oceans, and new ideas reshaped societies. Printing presses spread knowledge, science began to challenge old beliefs, and exploration connected distant lands. Yet amidst wars, trade, and revolutions, the rhythms of night remained constant. Sleep, though shaped by new forces, continued as a universal necessity, woven with custom, faith, and discovery. In villages and towns, most homes were simple. People slept on straw mattresses stuffed with hay, feathers, or rags, laid upon wooden frames or directly on floors. Blankets of wool covered families against winter's chill, while lighter linens sufficed in summer. Curtains around beds were common, not merely for privacy but to keep out drafts in houses with poor insulation. In many households, families still shared beds, parents, children, and sometimes servants, sleeping closely for warmth and companionship. Among the wealthy, chambers grew more elaborate. Four-poster beds with carved wood, heavy drapes, and feather mattresses displayed wealth and refinement. These beds became the centerpiece of a room, symbols of both comfort and status. The wealthy often possessed multiple sets of sheets, laundered and scented with lavender or rosewater. Servants attended to their master's sleep, warming beds with pans of hot coals or arranging pillows. Yet even in luxury, rest was vulnerable, disturbed by lice, illness, or the anxieties of politics and inheritance. One striking feature of early modern sleep was its division into two parts. Many people practiced a first sleep and a second sleep. After sunset, families would go to bed for several hours, then wake around midnight. In this quiet interval, they prayed, read, tended to chores, or even visited neighbors. Some reflected on dreams, writing them down or interpreting their meaning. After an hour or two, they returned to bed for their second sleep, resting until dawn. This segmented pattern was natural in a world without artificial lighting, shaped by the rhythms of firelight and darkness. Religion still infused nightly routines. In Catholic regions, prayers to saints for protection were common, while Protestants emphasized personal devotion before bed. Night was seen as a vulnerable time when demons or witches might strike, so charms or rituals were used to guard against harm. In some regions, holy water was sprinkled on beds, or crosses hung nearby. Dreams were considered meaningful, but interpretations varied. Some saw them as divine messages, others as deceptions. The line between the spiritual and the ordinary was never fully clear in the world of sleep. Medicine in this era also paid close attention to rest. Physicians, influenced by Galenic theory, believed sleep balanced the humors and restored health. Too much or too little was thought dangerous. Manuals offered advice: avoid heavy meals before bed, keep chambers ventilated, and maintain moral purity for peaceful sleep. Insomnia was treated with herbal remedies like chamomile, hops, or valerian, as well as warm baths. Some even prescribed music or gentle reading. Yet cures mixed with superstition, amulets, charms, and astrological charts guided nightly habits as much as science. Night in cities was both lively and dangerous. Taverns, theatres, and gambling houses kept crowds awake long after sunset. Street vendors sold food to late wanderers, and watchmen patrolled with lanterns. But crime and violence lurked in the dark. Robbers, drunkards, and unrest threatened safety. Many locked their doors early, retreating into the safety of beds. In contrast, the countryside was deeply silent, broken only by the call of owls, the bark of dogs, or the tolling of a distant church bell marking the hours. The wealthy sometimes transformed their bedrooms into social spaces. Visitors were received while the host reclined in bed, propped on pillows, a practice known as the relaxation in France. Kings and nobles conducted politics from these semi-private chambers, blurring the line between sleep and ceremony. For ordinary people, however, the bed remained practical, a place to collapse after long labor in fields, workshops, or kitchens. Exploration and trade also influenced rest. Exotic textiles such as cotton, silk, and fine linens entered European markets, replacing rougher fabrics for those who could afford them. Tobacco and chocolate became evening indulgences, sometimes believed to ease the nerves before sleep. Candles of beeswax or oil lamps provided longer hours of light, though costly, and gradually reshaped patterns of rest. The old rhythm of segmented sleep began to shift as evenings grew brighter, stretching wakefulness deeper into the night. Dreams in early modern Europe fascinated scholars and commoners alike. Some treated them as spiritual visions, others as the result of digestion or imagination. Books on dream interpretation sold widely, offering meanings for symbols. To dream of water meant fortune, of fire meant trouble, of animals foretold visitors or change. Courts and rulers sometimes consulted dreams before decisions, though skepticism grew among intellectuals. By the 17th century, philosophers like Descartes questioned whether dreams could be trusted at all, sowing seeds of modern doubt. For servants and the poor, sleep was often harsh. Many rested in attics, basements, or shared quarters with little bedding. Work demanded long hours, and fatigue often outweighed comfort. Children might sleep several to a bed, and apprentices lay near their tools. Travelers and beggars sought barns, inns, or church porches, grateful for any shelter. Yet even in these conditions, rest was shared, communal, and bound to survival. Night carried both peace and fear. Fires were a constant threat in wooden towns, and many slept lightly, ready to respond. Superstitions abounded. Witches were said to press upon sleepers' chests, causing nightmares, while ghosts wandered at midnight. To guard against such forces, people kept charms under pillows, from herbs to iron nails. These practices revealed a world where sleep was not just physical but spiritual, where unseen forces might intrude upon dreams. By the late 18th century, change was accelerating. Coffee houses spread, keeping minds alert into the night. Cities glowed brighter with oil lamps, and clocks became more common, disciplining hours of rest. Slowly, the old pattern of two sleeps faded, replaced by a single long slumber. Sleep was becoming more private, more structured, and more influenced by the demands of work and the march of industry. Yet at its core, it remained what it had always been, a return to silence, a surrender to the dark, and a renewal for dawn. In early modern Europe, sleep was shaped by religion, medicine, superstition, and new discoveries. It was both ordinary and extraordinary, connecting peasants in straw-filled lofts to kings in velvet-curtained chambers. It was a time of prayer, of dreams, of fears, and of renewal. As the centuries turned, sleep carried people through the turbulence of history, quiet moments of stillness in a world of constant change. And so, our journey through the ages comes to an end. We have walked through ancient villages and shining cities, wandered palace halls and quiet cottages, and seen how every people, in every time, prepared for the same mystery of the night. Though their customs were different, their beds made of straw or silk, their prayers whispered to many gods or to one, all were bound by the same rhythm, the closing of eyes, the drifting of thought, the surrender to dreams. History tells us of battles, kings, and empires. But behind every story, there was always the quiet pause of sleep. It was there, in the silence of night, that the world found renewal, again and again. Now, as the story fades, let yourself sink deeper into rest. Feel the calm of centuries surrounding you, as if the voices of the past are whispering you to sleep. Night has always been here. Night will always return. So breathe slowly, let go of the day,